Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today during this online postgraduate webinar for the MA in the History of the Book, which is studied with the School of Advanced Study, Institute of English Studies. My name is Noor. I'm a Senior Marketing Officer here at the University of London School of Advanced Study. I'm joined today by the Programme Director for the MA in History of the Book, Dr. Michael Durrant. Firstly, just a reminder that the application deadline for this programme is on the 31st of July 2025, and that's for the September intake. So that's when you'll be starting. I hope this webinar today answers all of your questions about studying a PhD with us, and it'll help you submit your application and get the process started. So for the first part of this webinar, Michael will be talking through his presentation about studying the programme and how you can benefit from it. Following the presentation, we'll have a live Q&A session where we'll answer as many of your questions as we can. You can post your questions in the chat box, which is on the right side of the screen. We'll also be answering, we'll also have a specialist team in the background, a couple of my colleagues who will be answering some of your questions there or posting links and just general messages. So you can keep an eye on that to see if your questions have been answered there or links have been posted there. So I think we can begin. Michael, would you like to begin your presentation and give a brief introduction to yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Welcome, everyone. I should say that it's for the MA and MRes I'll be presenting. If anyone does have any questions at all about postgraduate research, PhD programs, for example, you can also ask questions and I can pass on any questions that you have to our director of postgraduate research who can help you with that. But I can help you today with the MA and the MRes programs. I'll just say I'm Michael Durrant. I'm a lecturer in book history with a specialist in early modern book history. And I've been with the Institute of English Studies for about 1.5 years now, so I'm relatively new to the School of Advanced Study myself. But I think I should be able to talk you through many of the basics for the MA and MRes and give you a very broad introduction to what we do here with the history of the book. It's a very unique institution in a very unique school. The school as a whole only offers postgraduate programs, so we have no undergraduate students. We only have MA and PhD students, which you can imagine creates a very different kind of community, really, than you often get at other larger institutions and universities around London and in the UK. So it's quite a different place to study in many ways. In our history of the book, MA and MRes, which I'll come back to the difference between those later on, is quite a unique program too. I believe that we're probably only one of about 2 dedicated history of the book postgraduate programs in the world, and we're the first institution to offer the history of the book in any kind of meaningful way as a postgraduate MA program. So we are quite different in many ways, but we are, as I'm going to say in a second, part of a larger community of universities across London. But before I get there, I'll just say the overview today is going to be a little bit more about the school and our place as an institute within it. An overview of the MA and MRes programs, the difference between them. I'll talk about the degree structure. Along the way, I'll mention briefly a few points about assessment. And I'm going to emphasize a couple of things that are quite unique about the program, including the book trade internship and your access as one of our postgraduate students to the London Rare Book School. There's a little bit towards the end on admissions. And finally, as Noor was just saying to you, we'll have an opportunity for some questions at the end. So I said that we are quite a unique institution at the School of Advanced Study. The Institute of English Studies was established to represent English studies nationally and internationally. So as part of our remit, we teach the history of the book. We only teach the history of the book, but we have a much broader national and international remit, which is to represent English studies in all of its varieties. And that includes English studies as it pertains to book history, textual scholarship, and so on and so forth. So we're part of the School of Advanced Study, which I said earlier on, we're only really teaching postgraduate students. But we are part of a larger community of institutions all across London. Obviously, we're part of the University of London, and we're one of 17 member institutions that make up this larger federation. In a sense, Senate House, where we're based, which I'll turn to, you'll see an image later on, is kind of the head offices in a weird way for the University of London. But we are in collaboration with and member institutions alongside of places like University College London, Royal Holloway, King's College London, Birkbeck, Goldsmiths, and so on and so forth. Everything you can see there on the screen, we're part of that larger family of institutions. And as part of that, one of the other unique things that we can sometimes offer as part of our program is that we have sometimes a free exchange of teaching with other members of the University of London, with members, for example, across the last year of staff in publishing at University College London have taught with us and we have taught with them. So it does mean that as part of this kind of unique status that we have, we're able to bring in other voices from other institutions, which helps obviously to kind of enliven your studies. So the MA MRes in the history of the book, broadly, the MA program, the master's level program, is designed to introduce students to a very broad understanding and a hands-on experience of the chronological range of the book, going right the way back to the medieval period at least, through to the present day. Historically, the Institute of English Studies has specialised in a range of book history related methodological positions and theoretical points and more practical things. Bibliographical description, the study of the book as a kind of archaeological object and its anatomy is key, as is paleography, the study of historical writing systems, codicology, the study of manuscript forms, bookbinding, which should be fairly straightforward, the history and politics of printing, of publishing, and histories of reading and library history have historically, going right the way back to the early 1990s, been a central aspect not only of what we teach, but what we research and promote through the Institute. Overall, the course is designed to provide students with hands-on opportunities to deal with books as archaeological or historical objects, and teachers within the Institute are globally recognized experts in their field. So we cover, we have lecturers in medieval books, including who specialize in medieval illumination. We have people who specialize in Renaissance printing, early modern printing, both in England and elsewhere. And then we have people in later periods, so who specialize in Victorian printing and the industrialization of the book, through to people who deal with digital humanities approaches to textual editing. And also we have lecturers who work with us who deal with the book in the global context, and particularly things around political pamphleteering. So we cover quite a lot, but I'll show you later on how we diversify our offerings through not only term time modules, but something that we call the summer school. So the MA program can be taken as a full-time course, which of course you would complete in 12 months, or you can take it as a part-time student over 2 years, which is of course over 24 months. The MA consists of only one compulsory module, which is research methodologies. That's a module that I convene. It's a very broad introduction to book history, to the research skills and methodologies that are involved in studying the history of the book. It's a very, very broad outline, and part of what we try to do is on that module is to get students clued up on how it is that you describe books as physical objects. And as part of that, what we're doing is kind of teaching you the language of the book, which is useful for people who go into work in special collections libraries or in the rare book trade. So you take one compulsory module with me in term 1, and then a series of 5 taught modules plus the dissertation, which is 15,000 words. So each of your taught modules are worth 20 credits. Each of those modules have 2-hour seminars on a weekly basis. Often they're in seminar rooms at Senate House, but usually we are taking you out into the field, so to speak, to archives, libraries, museums is where we do a lot of our teaching. Each of your 20 credit modules will have an essay component as part of the assessment. That's usually a 5,000 word essay. We have, for each of the modules that we run, staggered deadlines for assignments, so you don't hand everything in all at the same time. The dissertation, as I said before, is 15,000 words, 60 credits, which you hand in at the very end of the academic year. I mentioned just before, teaching usually takes place at the School of Advanced Study in Bloomsbury in the Institute of English Studies. But more often than not, you'll be out and about doing other things, whether it's part of the seminars themselves or as additional excursions that we organise. We often also teach, of course, in Senate House Library, which is just a few floors up from us. All of our compulsory, well, one compulsory module and all of our optional modules are taught on either 1 or 2 days a week, usually Tuesday and Wednesdays. So we don't offer teaching on Mondays, Thursdays, Fridays. We have done this historically to help with our mature students, part-time students, students who work. So it opens up the flexibility for them. So you might end up with all of your modules taking place in one term just on a Wednesday, say, which allows you to spend all of that other time getting on with your research, taking up relevant employment if you needed to, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to give you a broad outline of what an academic year might look like as an MA full-time student. So as I said, you're only taking one compulsory module, research methodologies. It was the case, and the canny eye amongst you would have seen this before, that you would also have to take what we would call core modules, 2 core modules, out of a list of, say, 4 core modules. We are in the process of winding down the core component of our MA program to open up the flexibility for students. So by the time anyone wants to start with us in the next academic year, so September 2025, for example, we should have moved away from that core requirement. So you will only have one compulsory module, and then everything else is an open field. You can select from any of our other modules. What it might look like across term 1, 2, and 3. You'll have research methodologies in term 1, and then you'll have options such as the medieval book. And in the coming academic year, English bookbinding styles, led by David Pearson, who's a global expert in that field. In term 2, the early modern book in England, which will be led by myself. Textual Scholarship and Contemporary Editorial Theory, led by Christopher Ogue, and Modern Political Pamphlets might be one of our options, but that's still a little in the air at the moment. And then you have term 3, there are additional options that you can take in term 3 to make up your credits. So for example, if you haven't got enough credits from term 1 and 2, you can take our internship for credit. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And you can also take one of our short courses in June on the London Rare Book School for credit too, to make up your credits. And I'll come back to that again. The dissertation, as I said, is 60 credits. So this is what an academic year might look like as an MA full-time student. Obviously, modules can be a little up in the air until a little later in this academic year. So this might not be entirely fixed, but it will look something like this. So I wanted to mention a little bit about where we're situated. I've said that a little bit about why we're unique, I think. But also why it is you would study with us. And I think one of the key things for me that I've realized being here for the last year and a half is, and it's the obvious thing, it's the unparalleled resources that you're offered as a student at the School of Advanced Study. I mean, as I've said, 2 floors up from where we're located, we have Senate House Library. It's one of the finest research libraries in the humanities in the world. Millions of volumes, rare books, manuscripts, archival and digital collections. And the other thing that we have in Senate House Library is access to one of the country's foremost open shelf collections on book studies, with books ranging from everything to do with print, manuscript and so on, which is, as I said, housed in Senate House Library as part of the special collections. IES is, of course, also in the School of Advanced Studies, situated right in the heart of Bloomsbury. So you're a 5 to 10 minute walk away from the British Library, which we take you to in the first week of study with us, as well as specialist libraries and archives on health, medicine, theology, and many more. You're in the centre of London, essentially. So all of the libraries you can think of that will be relevant to your study, all of the museums, archives, special collections are all often within walking distance. And as I mentioned earlier, we do include excursions as part of our programme. Probably, I would say, around 6 or 7 excursions, extra trips that we take students on each term. I organise these excursions, and so as part of that, I take students to all kinds of institutions all across London, introduce them to members of staff and get private viewings of their collections. We also visit rare bookshops as part of this. And so we really do make the most of our geographical location and all of the benefits that do come with that. I mentioned earlier that in term 3, you can take what we call the book trade internship for credit as a kind of, lots of our students do this as a career enhancing opportunity. It's a module that gives students the opportunity of undertaking a placement of around 120 to 125 hours, usually taken in the spring, in a bookshop, a book-selling business, in a library, an archive. And you can do this to link your academic study to the world of the book outside of the university. So as I said, the module can be taken for credit. So you would write a 5,000-word essay or reflective piece following your internship. But many of our students choose to take it as an extracurricular activity as well. So the option is open for you. The internship is one of the things that I would say is entirely unique about what we do. We have access and relationships with a range of institutions and businesses all across London and indeed beyond, where we can place students. Many of our students who've gone into the internship program have made careers following that. Often they have to get taken up positions in the places where they do their internships. And just to give you a sense of the kinds of partners that we have more than this, but I ended up not being able to fit them onto the slides. But we're currently placing this year 2 students at the London Archives, formerly the London Metropolitan Archives. That's basically London's major archive. Maggs Brothers, I'll come back to Maggs Brothers. They work around the corner from us. They're the oldest antiquarian bookshop in the UK. They also have taken our interns. Our interns have got jobs there. Jarndyce Books, we've had 2 of our former students who work at Jarndyce. That's just opposite the British Museum, which is again just around the corner from us. We've developed a new partnership with the Dickens Museum, which is again 10 minutes walk away from Senate House. The Royal College of Surgeons just this year have become a new partner. We've got at least 1 student interning with them. Bernard Quaritch's, another major antiquarian bookshop in London, are also hosting our interns. One of our students from last year is currently working with Quaritch's. Peter Harrington is another intern opportunity. They've been partners with us for many years now, but another major antiquarian bookshop in London. A new partner for us is the British Jesuit Archives, and another partner for us is the Society of Antiquaries. But as I said, we do have more than this. The list is a little more extensive. New partners have included even one archive, a special collections library in Dublin, and we have connections up north in England as well, if you didn't want to do your internship in London. So it's a great opportunity, and I think, and one other reason why our program is really entirely unique in the UK and possibly elsewhere too, I think. So again, I said that you can make up your credits for the MA program by taking one of our short courses as part of the London Rare Book School. So the London Rare Book School usually takes place over 2 weeks in every June. So what this offers is a series of short courses which you can take for credit. So they run through a 1 week. You basically have a full module condensed into a single week. We have specialists from around the world who come and teach their specialism as part of the London Rare Book School. And you can, as I say, you can take one of these courses for credit, write a 5,000-word essay because you're taking it for credit. The only thing we ask is you pay an additional £50 fee to cover catering for the London Rare Book School. But aside from that, as an MA student with us, you don't have to pay anything extra on top of that. The list of planned courses for 2026, so that'll be in the spring, summer of the next academic year, include the anatomy of the book, which is a course that I run. That's a basic introduction. So if you've already studied with us by that point, it might not be the best option. However, it's there. Art in the book, the introduction to book collecting, digital editing, the early modern book in England, which is taught through the Warburg Institute, European bookbinding, a course on fakes and forgeries, a course on the magic book, on medieval women in the book, on provenance in books with David Pearson, and so on and so forth. There'll probably be more than this. There will be more than this over that 2-week period. But as a student with the Institute, you get the option of taking one of these courses for credit. So the list of modules I showed you earlier on as a possible template for a year of study with us is actually much more extensive in terms of options when you factor in the London Rare Book School offering. So I've basically been talking about the MA in the history of the book because the majority of our students come to us to do the MA, but we offer at least 4 postgraduate programs. So some of our students come to us and only want to do the postgraduate certificate or diploma. Essentially, what that means is you're taking taught modules across the 2 terms. For the certificate, you're taking 3 modules. For the diploma, you're taking 6. But the thing that unites both of those, the certificate and diploma, is you're not having to do a dissertation. So for anyone who wants to leave with a qualification, but without having to do the dissertation, then you can do both of those things. Otherwise, the MA program is exactly what I'm describing. So 120 credits, 6 modules, taught modules, plus the 60 credit dissertation, which is 15,000 words, and which you complete with the supervision of at least 1 or 2 supervisors over the spring and summer of the academic year. The MRes is the Masters of Research. Now, this is for students who prefer to research, independent research, more than taking taught modules. So the MRes means taking 3 taught modules. So you'll take 1 compulsory and 2 choice modules. But then you will have the dissertation, which is worth 120 credits. That's 30,000 words. I'm currently supervising an MRes student. They begin really their research for their much bigger dissertation, more or less right from the start of their year. So if you're more interested in doing the independent research and producing a more substantial piece at the end of your postgraduate study, then the MRes would be for you. But we have these 4 options that you might want to consider. So you'll find more information about admissions on the website. I don't want to go too much into this. It's probably quite obvious from the website and from what's on the screen here. We do have in place a normal minimum entrance requirement of an upper second class honours degree in any subject from a university in the UK, or an overseas qualification of an equivalent standard. For those of you who might be mature students who might be here, we do also interview all of our candidates, or anyone who applies to us will have a relatively informal online interview. And we also welcome students who come from a diversity of backgrounds, people with different kinds of experience that might be relevant to this study. So if you're a mature student, you've been in the world of work for years, you don't have that upper second class honours degree, that shouldn't automatically put you off. If you've got work experience that would make you ideal for as a student for a course like this, we would also like to hear from you, to talk to you, and to interview you too. But as I said, all of our students pass through an interview process. And at the end of the interview, we let you know the outcome, normally immediately. So I mentioned MAGS is one of our internship hosts. They, as I said, they're just literally around the corner from where I work. And MAGS have very generously set up the MAGS Scholarship. So the MAGS Scholarship awards, it covers fees in full at a home EU rate. If you're an international student and you're paying international rates, then you would have to pay the difference between home EU rate and the international rate. So the studentship is funded by Mags Brothers. As I said, it's one of the world's largest, oldest antiquarian booksellers. You'll find more information if you search for the Mags Scholarship online. You'll find how it is that you go about applying. I would look at that now if you are considering it, because I believe that the deadline for the Mags Scholarship is quite early. It comes up in March. One of the requirements is you have to apply for the MA or MRes first, or and then you apply for the scholarship. But I would actively encourage people to apply, particularly if you're from a background that is kind of non-traditional, in the sense that you're first generation, no one in the family has been to university before, or any kind of diversity of backgrounds. We're encouraging people to apply for the Mags Scholarship, because really what it was designed to do was to get people into the book trade who are from backgrounds where not many people from that background are in that book trade. You know, people who maybe are middle class or go through the Oxbridge system, for example. So I'd really encourage people to look into this if you think it's relevant. Part of the stipulation is, one option really, is that you can intern with Mags if you are if you're successful with this award. So you also get work experience with them. So please do look into that. Everything you would need to know is on the website. So I just wanted to finish up by briefly saying something about our graduates. One of the things I've noticed in the last year and a half is that many of our students go into the world of work in London, beyond, which has something to do with books. So when I take students on excursions, I'm constantly bumping into former IES History of the Book graduates. It happens nearly every time. And I thought I put together a list of the people that I know, or the places that I know people from our MA MRes program have gone on to work. Mags is obvious, Jarndyce, Harrington, Sutherland's, Quaritch, in terms of antiquarian bookshops. Auction houses such as Christie's and Tennant's have taken our graduates. We have graduates at the Royal College of Surgeons in England working in their archives and special collections. At SOAS, the National Art Library, which is based at the Victoria and Albert Museum, St John's College in Oxford, as far afield as the Grolier Club in New York. So one of the other things about our course is it's hands-on, and it has a very specific focus on building the skills that you're going to need in order to work with books in the future. That's ideally what we want. We want to train the book historians and the booksellers of the future, and the rare book librarians of the future. So if you're interested in that, that's why we would be relevant to you, I think. So yeah, that's everything that I can say in that I've got. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can email Cynthia Johnson. I put her email address into the slide here as well. Or you can email Andrew Nash if you've got questions more to do with postgraduate research. So that might be the PhD if anyone's arrived and wants to know more about that. But if you do want to talk to me, please feel free to email. I'm always willing to talk to you on Teams. My email address is michael.durrant, all lowercase, @sas.ac.uk. I'm more than happy to help out with that. So on that note, I will say, yeah, any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Michael. That was really interesting, especially seeing the number of connections that the IES has with all these external organizations and opportunities that potential students could have by joining the program. It's really, really great to hear. We have been posting some links in the chat box. So, for example, to the Mags Scholarship and the application process, so people can get those. We can start the Q&A session now. I have some FAQs that I'll ask you, and there are also some questions coming in through the chat box. So just a note to everybody watching, you can post your questions now in the chat box. There's one question that's come in from Charlotte Stock asking if there's a distance learning option for this course.
So we have had students who've done forms of distance learning. They're usually the MRes students. So MRes students, as I said before, take 3 taught modules, and then the majority of their study is taken up with the dissertation. So we have had some students who've really done hybrid. They've done all of their taught modules in one semester and then done everything else remotely in terms of researching for their MRes dissertation. The other option that we have had, which again is hybrid, so it's not 100% remote, but we have had students who have taken the research methodologies, which might be 2 hours a week for one term, and then made up a lot of their other credits from the summer school courses. Say if they're part-time over a couple of years, over a couple of summers, they've made up the remainder of their required credits from short courses over 1 or 2 weeks. And then they've spent the majority of their time working remotely on writing essays and writing the dissertation. So it's not, in my experience so far, I haven't encountered a student who's been 100% remote, but I have encountered students who've done this in a hybrid manner where they've had some taught modules and then they've tried to balance that out by working on their research remotely. We are interested in kind of developing that a little bit more. Obviously, as part of the program, there is a lot of hands-on teaching, I will say. Part of what we do is very dealing with physical objects in physical locations. But as I said, we try to counteract that by teaching everything on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So a lot of our students who don't live in London will come to join us just for the day and then go home to wherever they are. So I hope that's partially answered that question. There are options, I think, but 100% remote could potentially be a little challenging at this stage. But I'm happy to talk more in a little Teams meeting at some other point.
Great, thank you. Charlotte has asked where she can find the MRes fees. I've sent the link to the tuition fee page. So if you scroll around about halfway down that page, you'll see a list of the different institutes. You find Institute of English Studies, open that tab, and there is listed the full-time and part-time fees for the degree programs. Michael, I don't know if you can answer this, but are the fees the same for both the MRes and the MA version of the history of the book?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I apologize. Yes, sorry, I apologize. I don't want to say yes or no because I'll be wrong, I'm sure. But it should be there on the page. I have found that before myself.
Yeah. From what I can see, it does say MA and MRes together is the same fee, so I think that is correct. Great. Are there any more questions coming in? If not, I can go to Q&A. One of the Q&As is, how does one prepare to study at a master's level, and how is it different from studying at bachelor's level for people coming in?
No, it's a good question. I think one of the major differences is that there's going to be a lot of independent research. You say if you're taking 3 modules in one term, then that'll be 6 hours of teaching over 2 days a week. All of the hours outside of that, you might have some excursions. You might get involved in talks and other activities that take place within the institute and within the school. But you're doing independent research. You're going out there and you're figuring out with visits to libraries and archives and museums and so on and so forth. You're figuring out what you're interested in, what research specialism you want to develop for yourself. So there's a lot of that kind of independent work in the sense that you drive yourself and you explore yourself to figure out what it is you want to do with your MA and what you want to specialize in. I think for me, that seems to be the very clear shift that takes place. I would say, however, alongside that, our job is to guide you in that. So I say there's a lot of independent research, but you're not left alone. You see your tutors, your module tutors in seminars, but you can see them at any other point you want outside of that. If you want meetings to talk about your research interests, to talk about essays and so on and so forth, all of your module tutors will be available to do that. But again, it's about I think postgraduate study is all about developing your own voice and your own independence as a researcher.
Sounds great. Another question is, what are the time commitment expectations for studying an MA, whether it's full-time or part-time? How many hours a week would you say on average people should study at either of those?
Right. So I think they have on the web page for the MA and the MRes, there's probably, I think there is a section that kind of anatomizes exactly what they think the hours are going to be. I can't remember off the top of my head what they say on the web page about this, but as I said, if you've got 2 hours of in-class teaching taking place for each of the modules that you have in each of your terms. 3 modules, say, again, 6 hours a week condensed into a couple of days, maybe 1 day. So you'll have that time in class. But I think one thing I really would say is, without putting an official number to it, you do not underestimate how much time it takes to plan in advance of seminars, to read the material that you're asked to read. That depends on your tutor. Some tutors like to set a lot of reading. Some tutors don't set anything until after the seminar. But it does involve reading, lots of reading, going into special collections, going into libraries. And so you can do that remotely if you don't live in London. You can do a lot of that work just from home. But you do have to set aside quite a lot of time. We've got part-time students at the moment who do work around their studies. And I would say each week they're probably dedicating both to teaching, being in seminars, and reading. At least 2 days around about of their week will be occupied by studying. As far as I can tell, that seems to what happened for part-time students. So I haven't put a definitive number on that, but all what I would say is don't underestimate the time it can take to really do this course properly.
Great, thank you. One question from Jemima has come in. What do you look for in a personal statement?
My thing that I'm looking for at the moment is enthusiasm. Obviously, it doesn't happen often, but I've been working in universities for a while, and you can occasionally get those personal statements that are a bit cut and paste. So, you're sending it off to lots of institutions and it's not really tailored to where you're going. Because we're such a specific program and there's something quite unique about what we do, I would expect to see a personal statement that speaks directly to the kinds of themes that we deal with. We're dealing with the history of the book. And so I might want to see someone who talks about why they're interested in the history of the book. What aspect of the history of the book are you interested in? What do you want to do in the future? Say, if you're a younger student just coming out of an undergraduate degree, do you want to work in the world of the book? I would love to know if that's the case. And if that is the case, what area of the book trade would you like to work in? So enthusiasm and explaining a little bit why you're interested. I don't need to overcomplicate it. That's all I would say. If you're passionate about books, explain why and convince me that that's something that you want to do. That's enough for me, I think.
Great, thank you. I hope that was a helpful answer. It can be quite intimidating to kind of get started in this process. Another question is there an age limit to studying the Masters? Can somebody be too old or too young to study this degree?
No, not at all. Since I've arrived, we've had a mix of our course usually attracts, it's quite small, right? And so the first year I was teaching on this program, we had 6 new starters. Last year we had 15, so the numbers jumped up quite radically, but still that's small really in the grand scheme of things. You end up in modules with 5 or 6 other students sometimes. And one thing I've noticed about both of those cohorts, it's a 50-50 split between mature students and younger students. So this year, out of 15, I would say roughly half of them are fresh out of undergraduate degrees. They're like 21-ish. The remainder are all people who either are in the world of they're working. We've got a special collections librarian. We've got a GP. We've got a lawyer. And we've also got a judge who's retired, right? And last year as well, we had a publisher. We had a lawyer, a solicitor from the city who was retired. So we have, what is really nice about teaching on this program is the mix. We've got young students, young for an MA, right? They're the right age, they're 21. But then we have people who are into their 70s and beyond. And they all bring with them particular experience, that really enriches the course and produces excellent work. So no, the answer is no. You can't be too young. Obviously, there is a limit on being too young for an MA, but you can never be too old for this kind of stuff. We have people across the spectrum on this MA and MRes program, which is, I think, why it's enjoyable.
Great, thank you. Another question is, you may have answered this somewhat in the presentation, but what kind of career opportunities does this degree lead to for people within?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I would say the career opportunities of what I was describing. So working in the antiquarian book trade, one of the 6 students that started last year has just bagged a job with Bernard Quaritch, which, if anyone knows anything about Quaritches, it's really hard to get a job with them as a rare book trade antiquarian bookseller. And he managed to do that. He was also the recipient of the MAG scholarship, which is probably worth bearing in mind. So we have people who go into the rare book trades. They do cataloguing work. They're salespeople as well, dealing with books that are hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions, and working in a trade that is incredibly vital and that we're really connected to in London. And then outside of that, we have students who go on to do further training in library sciences, people who go on simply to work in special collections libraries, people who work in museums, who do exhibitions around books and things like that. We have, of course, people who go on and do PhDs and become lecturers. So again, from my experience in the last year and a half, what I keep seeing every time I go out into London and visit special collections libraries and things like that is I keep seeing our graduating students everywhere, including mature students who graduated in like 1995, who are working in special collections libraries at like the V&A and things like that. So in terms of career opportunities, the one thing to remember is if you want to go into the world of books, at the moment, we are the only course of its kind in the UK and really kind of globally, I would say. A lot of the book trade currently look to us to source employees. So that's what I would say about that. It's a niche area in the grand scheme of things, but we're the only course in that niche area. So our students do very well, I think, in terms of employability.
That's great. Thank you. What is the student environment and journey like? How many students do you have per cohort?
Yeah, so as I said, they can be very small, like 6 last year, 15 this year, which if you're in any other, know anything about institutions anywhere else, if you're in there's only 15 people on a course, that doesn't often happen even at MA level for bigger universities, right? So we're quite small, but because of that, our students develop a community with themselves, really. One of the things I tried to do since I arrived is to boost the number of excursions that we do. So every other week, say, we're out and about in London, visiting a library, an archive, a museum, a rare bookshop, and you get to network with people who work in this trade. You get to meet with the other students outside of the class. And the one thing I've seen for both cohorts that I've taught so far, they just do it themselves. They set up WhatsApp groups, they meet outside of class every week, they become very close because the classes are small, and they stay in touch as well after the MA. That's what I've noticed. It's a very tight community, but a good thing about it is because it's quite a close-knit community beyond IES in the world of the book, it's a great place to network with people who are not doing your course, the people who work in the museums and rare bookshops. So I think it's a really nice place to be because it's quite intimate in that respect. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Another question we have is, what level of support do supervisors give at MA level or tutors give at an MA level of study?
So the level of support that we offer beyond obviously teaching and providing the syllabus and readings and marking, obviously, the level of support that we provide is often really down to the student and the needs of the student. So I currently teach some students who require more support. So I will be maybe meeting with them outside of class once a week or once every 2 weeks to discuss their progress, to discuss their readings, their ideas. Some students might be more confident and so don't desire to speak to their tutors as often, but it really depends on you. If you want to meet with each of your tutors for each of your modules every single week outside of your seminar time, then you can do that. If you want that additional support, that's really up to you. You come forward and ask us. We're always available for that kind of thing. So we can offer as much support as is needed on an individual basis, I think would be the answer there, as much as you need, really. And because we're smaller cohorts, we can tailor what we do. The course is quite bespoke in that way. So we can, for example, the internship program, we place students depending on their skills and interests at specific internship posts. So we try and tailor the experience for students to best suit their needs. So we do put quite a lot of work into that. And I think students are very well supported where we're at.
Great, thank you. What is it that drew you to book history and fascinated you about the subject area?
So like nearly everyone else who is a lecturer in book history or teaches book history, I came at book history from an adjacent discipline. Everyone I work with, they come from art history, they come from history, they come from English lit, and I come from English literature background. I was a lecturer in early modern literature before, and one of the things that I taught and researched was around print culture. I realized really I was a book historian rather than an English lit person, so I may as well just kind of own up to that, and that's how I got into it. But I think if you're dealing with texts in any form from the past, they're enriched and enlivened, not just by reading them, but by understanding how they're made, circulated, read, recorded. The full picture of what it means to feel, touch, encounter books can only really be understood within the context that book history offers. And I think lots of other academics in different but adjacent fields are probably secretly book historians. They just don't say it. And I think we're a course where we're allowed to be like, yeah, book history is what we do. And so, yeah.
That's great. We have a couple of minutes left, so I'll ask one more question. If there's any more final questions, please add them to the chat box and then we'll end the session. For anybody who's interested in any of the other institutes but really wants to focus on book history, is there an option to take, say, a module or do any kind of study with the other SAS institutes?
So currently, at the moment, we do offer, there's a World of the Book in the Renaissance is a module that's run by the Warburg Institute with William Bill Sherman, Giles Mandelbrot, and we do offer that on a every other year basis, really, to IES students. So there is occasionally the opportunity to take courses with other institutions such as that. And also when it comes to supervision of dissertations, we can bring in other people from other institutes to help us with that. The Warburg is always the obvious choice because they do deal with book history, and Giles Mandelbrot, who runs the library there, is a book historian. So he's the kind of person that we could bring in from other institutes. But you should remember as well that each of the institutes that has its own library, you will have access to, right? So the Warburg is a brilliant example. It's like a world-class open shelf library with, 17th century books just sat on the shelf that you can take off yourself, which is unheard of. You can't do that anywhere else, is across the street from where we are. So there is a symbiotic relationship, I think, with the other institutes, which you can take advantage of as a student with us.
And I think you can also attend certain seminars, or they have certain open kind of public seminars.
Yes, each institute will run its own seminar series. You can go to any of those lectures or seminars.
Great, thank you. I think that is all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. I hope everybody who's listening found this really useful. Michael did put a couple of links up in his slides of people you can contact. Michael, can I put your email address in the chat box as well? Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, just a reminder that the application deadline is the 31st of July. So make sure you get that in. But Michael mentioned the scholarships deadline being in March. So you do need to get your applications in sooner than that if you want to apply for the scholarships. So that is the end of the session. Thank you, Michael, for your time today. And I'll put another couple of links in the chat box, but we're happy to end it there. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.